This revenge story contains intense acts of retribution that may be excessive and could be disturbing to some viewers.
It started with a text from a coworker, Mark, a guy in accounting. "Shane, I saw Carol with another guy. They looked close. My fingers tightened on my phone. Carol? My Carol? We'd been married 10 years. 10 years. Sure, things had been off lately. A cold war of late nights at the office, clipped conversations at dinner, the space between us in bed growing wider. But this? Never. Not Carol. I told myself it was a mistake, a bad angle. Maybe she was helping a friend, someone with a bad back or something. I typed back, "Who?" Mark replied, "Some dude in a suit, downtown, by the coffee place on 5th. That was enough for the chill to set in. Doubt, a slimy thing, had taken root. I spent the rest of the day on edge. My project management spreadsheets blurred. Meetings felt like wading through molasses. I kept checking my watch, the seconds dragging. I needed to know, needed to see for myself. Work ended at 5, but I left at 4:30. Told my team, got a doctor's appointment. They didn't bat an eye. I drove straight to Carol's office. It was a sleek, modern building, all glass and steel. I parked across the street, in the shadow of a larger skyscraper. The streetlights flickered on as the sun began to dip behind the buildings, casting long, distorted shadows. I waited. Each minute felt like a punch to the gut. My hands were clammy on the steering wheel. The traffic roared, a relentless hum in my ears. Then I saw her. She walked out with him, Michael Ross, her boss. He was tall, with a confident swagger, his dark hair slicked back. He wore a tailored suit, the kind that cost more than my monthly mortgage. They were laughing, heads close together. Michael placed a hand on the small of Carol's back, a casual, possessive gesture that made my blood boil. It wasn't just friendly, it was intimate. They didn't look like coworkers. My heart hammered against my ribs. I started my car, keeping a safe distance, following them. Ross's black car glided through the traffic, smooth and expensive. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. They pulled into a parking garage by the cafe, a trendy place with big windows and sidewalk seating. I parked a block away, found a spot where I could see inside. I watched as they went to a corner table, their backs to the window. They were talking, laughing, their hands intertwined across the table. I pulled up my phone, my hands shaking. I zoomed in, snapped a photo. Another. A third. Each picture was a punch, a confirmation of what I didn't want to believe. This wasn't a friendly coffee meeting. This was an affair. I watched them, their faces illuminated by the dim cafe lights, their heads close together, oblivious to everything but each other. I felt numb, a cold emptiness spreading through my chest. The city buzzed around me, oblivious to my silent heartbreak. I had been living in a lie, and I hadn't even known it. The photos on my phone were proof, a brutal testament to my betrayal. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing, what I now knew. This wasn't a small mistake, this was intentional, calculated, and it was happening right under my nose. I couldn't confront her yet. Not like this. Not without solid proof, undeniable evidence that could shatter her carefully constructed lies. I needed more than grainy photos from a distance. I needed to know the full extent of their betrayal. So, I became a ghost. I kept following them, learning their patterns. They were creatures of habit. The same cafe Tuesdays and Thursdays. The same hotel, a boutique place downtown, every other Wednesday. They thought they were being so clever, so discreet. They were wrong. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, locations. I kept a log, meticulous and precise, like a project schedule gone horribly wrong. I used a cheap notebook, not my work planner. The act of writing, the scratch of the pen on paper, calmed the rage simmering just beneath the surface. It was a way to channel my anger, to make it productive. Each entry was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I'd leave work early, park blocks away from her office, and wait. I'd watch her walk out, her stride a little too confident, her smile a little too bright. I'd follow them, like some low-rent private eye, my heart twisting every time I saw Michael's hand on her arm, every time I saw the way she looked at him. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing it was inevitable, knowing I couldn't look away. I learned to anticipate their moves, their routines. The cafe, the same corner table. The hotel, always room 304. I managed to get a shot of them entering that room together, their bodies close, their faces flush with something that wasn't professional. It was sickening, that photo, but I needed it. I needed to be sure, to have concrete proof before I confronted her. It was like an addiction, this need for proof. I was consumed by it. The emotional toll was immense. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating. I was living on coffee and rage. My focus at work suffered. My colleagues asked questions, but I brushed them off, my mind always somewhere else, tracking her, documenting their trysts. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was a master of logistics at work, planning and executing complex projects, but now I was using those same skills to map out my wife's affair. It was a twisted kind of performance review. One night, after another late meeting, Carol came home smelling of his cologne, a musky scent that was definitely not mine. It hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, watching her. She looked tired, but there was a spark in her eyes, a secretive energy that made me feel ill. I sat her down on the couch, the photographs spread out on the coffee table like a morbid deck of cards. Her face went pale when she saw them, the color draining from her cheeks. She tried to deny it at first, her voice trembling. "Shane, I don't know what these are." But the evidence was undeniable. The dates, the times, the photos, it was all laid bare in front of her. She broke down then, the tears streaming down her face, her voice a choked whisper. "I'm so sorry, Shane. I'm so sorry." Her tears didn't move me. Not after what I'd seen, not after what I'd endured. All I felt was a cold, hollow ache where my heart used to be. I had the proof, the concrete confirmation I craved, but it didn't bring me any satisfaction, just a deeper understanding of her deceit. The sound of her sobbing echoed in the silence of our living room, a pathetic symphony of betrayal. I wasn't the only one who'd been betrayed. Michael had a wife, Beth. She was just as much a victim as I was. I found her on social media. Her profile was private, but I sent a message, a brief explanation. "I think your husband is having an affair. I have proof. My name is Shane." I included my phone number. I didn't expect a response, but 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Her voice was low, controlled, a hint of steel underneath the tremor. "I know," she said, her tone flat. I suspected something was off. We agreed to meet, neutral territory, a quiet coffee shop in a neighborhood neither of us frequented. I walked in, saw her sitting in a corner booth, her eyes dark and serious. She was older than her picture suggested, her face drawn, her eyes holding the weariness of someone carrying a heavy weight. We didn't waste time on small talk. I laid out the photos on the table, one by one, the stark evidence of her husband's infidelity. Her face hardened as she looked at them, her jaw clenching. There was no shock, no surprise, just a cold, simmering anger. "He's been at it for a while, hasn't he?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "A few months, at least," I replied. "I've been tracking them." She didn't flinch. "I knew it," she began, her voice tighter now. "I just needed the proof." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of our shared betrayal hanging heavy in the air. "What do you want to do?" she finally asked, her gaze unwavering. There was a strange calm in her eyes, a quiet determination that mirrored my own. I laid out my plan, the bare bones of it, the calculated steps I had been mapping out in my head. I explained my desire to expose them, to make them pay for their deceit. I didn't go into detail, not yet, just the basic outline. She listened, her eyes fixed on mine, never once looking away. When I was done, she nodded, a single sharp movement of her head. "I'm in," she said, her voice firm. There was no hesitation, no questions, just a grim acceptance of the need for action. She understood the depths of the betrayal, the desire for retribution. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me, a connection to this woman I had only just met, bound by the shared pain and a common goal. "I've been waiting for this chance," she added, a flicker of something almost like a smile crossing her lips, a cold, calculating smile. It was a smile that made me think she was capable of anything. She wasn't just a victim, she was a warrior, ready to fight back. She handed me her number. "Call me later, we'll plan the rest." A week later, the plan was in motion. Beth and I had meticulously gone over every detail, every possible scenario. It felt strange, this alliance with a woman I barely knew, but our shared desire for revenge created a bond that transcended polite introductions. It was a partnership born of betrayal, fueled by a desire for justice. I invited Carol out for a date night, a carefully orchestrated charade. I hadn't spoken to her much since the night I confronted her with the photos. The silence between us thick, with unspoken accusations and resentments. She seemed surprised by the invitation, a flicker of cautious hope in her eyes. She agreed, though, her voice strained, like she was walking on eggshells. She didn't know what I was planning, and I wasn't about to give her any clues. I took her to the restaurant, the same place where she and Michael had been meeting, the trendy spot with the big windows and sidewalk seating. It was a calculated risk, but I needed to see her reaction, to gauge her level of guilt. She tensed up the moment we walked in, her eyes darting around the room like she was expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. She nervously adjusted her scarf, her hands trembling slightly. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral, a mask of calm hiding the storm raging inside me. "You seem a little tense." "I'm fine," she said, her smile forced, her voice too high. "Just a little tired." We sat down at a table, not the corner one they had used, but close enough that she could see it. I ordered a bottle of wine, a pricey red that I knew she liked. I made small talk, asking her about her day, about her work, things I no longer cared about, but things that made her think things might return to a semblance of normalcy. Her answers were vague, her eyes constantly scanning the room, her discomfort palpable. I watched her, enjoying her discomfort, a grim satisfaction spreading through me. I was in control, and she didn't know it. Halfway through dinner, I saw them. Michael and Beth walked in, their expressions carefully neutral, their bodies stiff, their movements mirroring mine earlier in the week. They were a perfect, if unlikely, couple. They moved past us and sat at the table right next to ours, their presence a loaded gun aimed right at Carol's head. Carol froze, her fork clattering against her plate. Her face, already pale, turned whiter, her eyes wide, with a combination of fear and panic. "Shane," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her hand reaching for mine. "What's going on?" I just smiled. A cold, hard smile that held no warmth. I took a sip of my wine, savoring the moment, the taste of revenge sweet on my tongue. I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension build, letting her squirm. "Just a coincidence, I guess," I said, my voice deceptively calm. "Or maybe not." I waved Beth over, my smile widening as I saw the look on Carol's face, the dawning realization of what was about to happen. "Join us," I said, my voice sharp. "We're all friends here, right?" Beth walked over, her gaze unwavering, and sat down next to me, Michael following close behind. The four of us sat together, the air thick with tension, the clinking of silverware replaced by a deafening silence. Carol looked like she was about to bolt, her eyes darting around, desperately searching for an escape route. But I had her cornered, and I wasn't about to let her go. "We're not done yet," I said, my voice low and steady, my hand resting on her arm, a possessive grip that belied my coldness towards her. "There's one more place we need to go." I saw fear flash across Carol's face, and it was more satisfying than I thought it would be. The game was afoot. Her carefully built lie had just been knocked down and was about to crumble into dust. Carol and Michael protested, their voices a pathetic blend of panic and desperation. "Shane, no, please," Carol whimpered, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. Her voice trembled like a broken string, a stark contrast to the confident tone she used in the office. This isn't you." Michael, attempting to regain some semblance of control, spoke in a forced, strained tone, trying to sound authoritative. "This is insane, Shane. You can't do this. You'll regret this." He tried to meet my gaze, but his eyes kept darting away, unable to hold my stare. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed in the tense silence of the restaurant, drawing the attention of nearby diners who quickly averted their gazes, trying to pretend they didn't see the drama unfolding. "Oh, but I can," I said, my voice low and menacing. Each word was deliberate, like a sharp blade slicing through the air. "You think I'm just going to let you waltz away after what you've done? After all the lies? You were having your fun, now it's my turn." I leaned closer to Carol, my eyes narrowing, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you think this was going to stay secret forever? Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" I was going to tell you," Carol stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "It was a pathetic lie, and we both knew it." "Oh, you were you?" I said, raising an eyebrow, the sarcasm thick in my tone. "When, Carol?" "After you'd had your fun. When you were done playing house with him?" I flicked my head towards Michael. "When you had enough of his expensive cologne and designer clothes, is that when you were going to tell me?" Michael's face was ashen, his body stiff, with a fear I found immensely satisfying. "This is going too far, Shane," he managed to choke out. "This isn't like you." I turned to him, my gaze unwavering, my voice hard. "You don't know me, Michael. You never have. You thought you could just waltz into my life, steal my wife, and get away with it. You thought I was too busy with my spreadsheets to notice. You were wrong." Beth watched us, her expression unreadable, her eyes narrowed and cold. It was unsettling. the depth of icy calm she projected. She hadn't said a word, but her presence added another layer to the tension, another element of dread. They caved, of course. They had no choice. The threat to their careers, their carefully crafted public images, was too much to bear. They knew I wasn't bluffing. They knew I meant every word I said. We left the restaurant, a grotesque tableau of betrayal and retribution. Carol and Michael walked like condemned prisoners, their heads down, their bodies shaking. They were no longer the confident lovers they were just hours ago. They were exposed, vulnerable, and utterly defeated. The walk to the car was a silent procession, each step heavy with the weight of their shame. The drive to the hotel was a tense, suffocating affair. No one spoke. Carol and Michael sat huddled in the back seat, their bodies rigid, the silence broken only by their ragged breaths. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. I glanced at them in the rearview mirror. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, a dark and twisted pleasure at their misery. This was my show, and they were the unwilling stars. I parked in the garage, the hum of the engine suddenly loud in the silence of the car. The air hung thick and heavy with anticipation. I got out, the city noises filtering in, momentarily piercing the heavy silence, and opened their doors. "Let's go," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. We entered the hotel, the plush carpets and soft lighting doing nothing to soften the harsh reality of what was about to happen. The staff, sensing the tension, made themselves scarce, their smiles fading. I led them down the hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing against the quiet. The walk felt both too fast and too slow, time stretched and distorted by the tension of the moment. We reached room 304, the number glaring at me, a stark reminder of their infidelity. I unlocked the door, the key a tangible symbol of my control. I pushed the door open, the room a familiar, yet now alien space. The bed, where they had shared their secret moments, was now a stage for their public humiliation. "Welcome home," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Hope you're comfortable." Carol was trembling, her body shaking uncontrollably, her eyes wide and pleading. "Shane, please, I beg you, don't do this to us," she sobbed. "We made a mistake. We can fix this. We can work through this." She reached out to me, her hand trembling, her touch repulsive. I stepped back, avoiding her grasp, my gaze hardening. "You should have thought of that before you decided to betray me," I said, my voice cold and unwavering. "Before you decided to ruin my life. Now it's your turn." Michael, desperate, tried a different approach, attempting to appeal to my sense of reason. "This isn't right, Shane," he said, his voice strained. "This isn't going to solve anything. Let's just talk. Let's figure this out." He was grasping at straws, desperate to escape the inevitable. "There's nothing to figure out," I said, cutting him off. "This isn't a negotiation. This is a reckoning." I gestured to the bed, my voice sharp and commanding. "Now get on the bed, both of you." They hesitated, their eyes darting between each other and me. Fear etched on their faces. "What do you mean?" Michael asked, his voice cracking. "You heard me," I said, my voice rising. "Strip. Now, every last piece of clothing. You were comfortable enough doing it in secret. Now you can do it in front of us." Or, I added, my eyes narrowing, my voice dangerously soft, "I walk out of here, and I make those phone calls. Your choice. But be quick. I'm not a patient man." Their faces drained of all color. They knew they had no choice. Slowly, like puppets on a string, they began to undress. Each piece of clothing they shed a painful reminder of their deception. They were stripped bare, not just physically, but emotionally. Their carefully constructed facades shattered, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. I watched them, a strange mix of anger and satisfaction swirling inside me. They were finally seeing themselves for who they were: cheaters, liars, betrayers. All the way, I said, my voice cold and hard, my gaze unwavering, everything off. The final pieces of clothing fell to the floor, leaving them standing there, naked and humiliated. Carol buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Michael stood there, his body trembling, his face a mask of shame and despair. I grabbed the hotel's robe belts, their soft texture incongruous with the coldness I was feeling. I forced them onto the bed, their faces a mixture of terror and shame. Quickly and efficiently, I bound their wrists to the headboard. Michael tried to struggle, but he was too weak, too broken. Carol made no attempt to resist, her body racked with sobs, her gaze fixed on the floor. I then bound their ankles to the bedposts. They were trapped, completely at my mercy. I gathered their clothes, the scattered pile a symbol of their lost dignity. Then, turning to Beth, my gaze met hers. A silent question passed between us, and I saw a cold, calculating glint in her eyes. I nodded once, my lips pressed into a thin line, and we left the room, the click of the door closing behind us a final, decisive sound. I glanced back at the closed door, feeling a mix of satisfaction, emptiness, and a strange, chilling calm. They were still in there, naked and exposed, their lies finally stripped away, left to face the consequences of their actions. The game was over, and I had won. In the car, Beth turned to me, her expression unreadable. "What now?" she asked, her voice quiet, a hint of curiosity in her tone. She was calm, almost detached, like she was observing the aftermath of an experiment. She had played her part, and now she wanted to see the results. I shrugged, the action feeling heavy and tired. "I'm done with her," I said, my voice flat. "I don't want anything more to do with her." As for him, I paused, a flicker of something almost like pity flashing through me, quickly extinguished. "That's your call." I pulled Michael's phone from my pocket, a sleek black rectangle that held all his secrets. I handed it to her. His contacts, his emails, his texts, his browser history, it's all yours. Do whatever you want with it. Expose him, fire him, ruin him. It's your choice. You deserve to decide what happens next. She took the phone, her fingers brushing mine, a fleeting connection that held a shared understanding. She held it in her palm, her eyes focused on it, as though it was a powerful weapon. She smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent a chill down my spine. "I think I'll enjoy this," she said, her voice low, a hint of something almost like amusement in her tone. I had a feeling Michael's life was about to become very difficult indeed. We drove in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past the windows. I glanced in the rearview mirror, trying to catch one last glimpse of the hotel, the place that had been a symbol of betrayal and a catalyst for revenge. It was just another building now, its secrets hidden behind its facade. I was finally free. I didn't need to watch them anymore. I didn't need to plot anymore. I was done. The silence in the car stretched, broken only by the sound of the engine and the hum of the traffic. I didn't know what was going through Beth's mind. I knew we had shared a moment of retribution, a brief connection born of betrayal. But beyond that, I didn't know her. We were two strangers bound by a shared experience, a brief alliance formed out of necessity, now parting ways. I should probably get going, I said as I pulled up to an intersection, my voice tired. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away from this night. The memories, the weight of what I had just done. I needed to be alone. Thanks for your help, Beth. She nodded, her gaze unwavering, and got out of the car without a word. She walked away, her back straight, her steps confident, a woman who had just taken back her power. I watched her for a moment, a sense of admiration mixed with a hint of unease. She was capable of anything. As I drove away, I glanced back at the hotel, one last look. Carol and Michael were still in that room, naked and exposed, their world crashing down around them. They thought they were untouchable. They thought their affair would never be uncovered, that they could play with my life without consequences. They were wrong. So very wrong. I didn't feel triumphant, as I had thought I would. The hollow feeling was still there, a void where my heart used to be. The revenge hadn't filled it, hadn't healed the wounds. It had just changed them. I was free of Carol. I was free of their lies and deceits. I was no longer bound by their actions. But the pain remained, a dull ache that would probably linger for a long time. The taste of revenge was bitter, not sweet. But at least now, I was free to move on. I drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. The city lights seemed to blur into one long, continuous stream. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were before. The life I had known, the marriage I had cherished, it was all gone. I was starting over, the weight of the past hanging heavy, but also with a sense of hope for a new beginning for me and an end for her. And that had to be enough.